So we're back today with a slab soap tutorial, and we're going to go through how this all kind of works. But I thought we'd just kind of discuss lye solutions and getting to emulsion and things like that. So I've got our oils here. I'm just going to add my lye solution. Now, if you do happen to have any kind of floaties in there because of adding in silks or whatever it might be, sugars, and you want to get rid of them, pouring it through a strainer like this is absolutely perfectly fine. So you just make sure it is a stainless steel one before you pour it through. And you can see there we've got a few floaties from the silk that I was using. So we're just going to take those out and get those kind of popped away. And then we're going to bring this to emulsion. Now, emulsion is a really important thing to be able to do within soap making, because what you want to be able to do with this soap in particular is to keep everything fluid. So you've got enough time to colour, bottle, and then pour your soaps into the slab mould. So I'm going to give it a quick stir here, and I always really enjoy this part of soap making where we get the stick blender in and we bring this to an emulsion, and you see it go from this kind of clear, kind of brownish, oily colour to that beautiful kind of creamy white colour. So the first thing that's really important when it comes to bringing your oils to an emulsion is when you put the stick blender into the oils, you're going to burp it or bounce it up and down to get rid of the air that's contained within the bell of the stick blender. And then as you move on and you create your emulsion, you're going to give it short bursts with the stick blender and then stir. So you can see here, short burst and stir, short burst and stir, and you just want it to hold on to the bell of that stick blender. Now here you'll see, if I bring this up to the camera, so if you look along the shaft and the bell of the stick blender, you can see it's just starting to separate ever so slightly, and it's not making a nice cover to that bell. There's not a nice cover of the soap on it. So we're going to pop it back in, burp it once again, give it a stir and a few more blasts just to make sure that it's going to come together and be a really nice homogeneous looking batter that we can then work with. So again, you'll see, just give it a quick stir, and that should now be a beautiful emulsion. We'll just scrape off all of the stuff on the stick blender as much as we can, and then we're good to move on to the next section. So now we've got our oils and our lye combined, and we've got a nice emulsion going on. We're going to bring in our colorants here. So I've got lots of blues for the water. I've got some oranges and some reds for the kois themselves. And we're going to get these all into our various squeeze bottles. Now you are going to need a squeeze bottle for this technique because you need the precision and you need to be able to kind of lay this in where you want it exactly. So that's why they're all in squeeze bottles. Now, you'll find that some people love using squeeze bottles, some people hate it. I personally don't mind cleaning them out. Some people will use inserts that allow you to then squeeze from an insert and not get them dirty. But I just find that it's very easy to kind of just squeeze all of the excess out and then leave them to soak, allow all of that excess soap to get kind of softened down, and then they will clean up perfectly well. But you choose to use your squeeze bottles the way you wish, and realistically for this technique you do need to use them. Here is a trick for shaking squeeze bottles without making a mess everywhere. So what you want to do is you want to squeeze the bottle in and then put your finger over the top like that and shake the bottle. Now what this means is going to happen is once you then release it, that squeezed bottle in is going to suck the soap back in and mean that it doesn't kind of spray out everywhere. So that's a very quick tip for getting squeeze bottles not to spill things everywhere and make a mess everywhere. So let's get the rest of these shaken up, and as you'll see, some of them got extensions on, and if you'd like me to do a video on those, please leave a comment in the box below. And then we've got the colours there that are ready to go on top. We're going to colour our main batch a kind of light blue to go in alongside the blues that we've already got going on. Now what I normally do in order to do that is I pop some of my batter. Now I'm going to actually pull off a little bit of batter here to keep for white. Now this particular recipe that I'm using will stay white over time, and then we're going to colour the rest of that with some blue. Now I'm going to use a little bit of blue to start with because I can always add a little bit more blue to get the consistency of colour that I want. But if I add it all and then have to kind of add titanium dioxide, everything's going to be kind of at different points for setting up, because titanium dioxide will create a faster trace. So I am going to add a little bit in here, but this is going to thicken up a lot quicker than the rest of the soap. So you can see there I should have added a little bit less of the blue on that occasion, but we're going to have to run with this as it is. And because this is the base soap, I can afford to have that setting up a little bit quicker. Now, the one thing with titanium dioxide, as you'll see here, You do need to stick blend it a little bit sometimes to get the colour to lighten up, but I only want to do this very, very shortly to get the colour to disperse, but not so much that it's going to start thickening trace up. And this is where the difficulty with titanium dioxide can come in, is that sometimes if you use it later on in the process and you don't stick blend it through, you get white spots. And if you do stick blend it, your trace is going to thicken up more so than the pots that are out there. So once we've gotten to this point, I'm going to pour the entirety of that into my slab mould, and we'll get on with the pour here. So let's just get this into the mould and settling in, and I'll show you what we're then going to do. Because this is all the soap that we're going to need in this colour, we can pour everything in and get it scraped out. We want to scrape as much in here as we possibly can do to make sure that we are not wasting any of our precious oils. So whenever you do anything like this and you know that the colour isn't going to be used anymore, scrape as much of it out as you can so that you've got the most amount of soap in your slab mould. We'll begin with the water. So what I want to try and do is get laid into here what is essentially going to be our water. Now, this is going to move around as I add the additional bits of soap into our canvas here. So we're going to lay down our water first. Now I'm going to get my first kind of lot of water in here, and I'm doing just a very, very rough approximation. I've kind of laid this out in my head, so I know kind of what I'm looking for. And we're going to go for 2 koi fish in here. So I want to leave enough room that they can sit in, but I also want there to be enough kind of like movement around them. And as you'll see, this is going to kind of flow around the oranges when they start to go in. So I've got my light blue as the base, a medium blue and a dark blue. And I'm just really kind of throwing this in roughly willy-nilly. You can see here I'm really just kind of getting it towards the surface. I don't want it to penetrate too deeply. I obviously want it to go in somewhat, but I don't want it to penetrate too deeply. And then what we'll do is we'll bring in a little bit of our white here. Now you'll see when we actually cut this that my batter does turn this beautifully kind of white creamy colour. So I'm not particularly worried about the look of it at the moment. And this is something you need to bear in mind, is that the colour that you see in your batter is not necessarily the colour you are going to get. So that kind of medium blue colour looks a bit greeny, but it is going to lighten up into a nice tealy blue rather than it having that green tone in it. So just be aware of that when you're using it. Now what I'm going to do here is just lay in the rough shapes of my fish. So this is its head, and I'm kind of just moving it along here, giving a little separation between the head and the body, and then we'll come back in with another colour. And I'm just using a cocktail stick or a bamboo skewer to move some of the soap around in my palette here to give it some feeling of shape. Again, we're going with a little bit of white, and then we'll go in with our other colours, and we're just basically going to build all of our shapes up. And I'm going for very simple shapes here, just to kind of create the effect of it being fish. I'm not looking for like hyper-realism. I'm just looking for something that is going to read as a fish in some water. So again, these long extensions on our soap squeeze bottles do help to be able to position that soap exactly where you need it. Now, some of them I cut a little bit too wide, and I could have probably done with a little bit of a narrower opening to it. But as you can see here, I'm just laying in that rough shape of a fish into the water. And as we move things around, it's going to just look more and more like a fish in a pond, which is the effect I was going for. And then what we'll do here is give ourselves a couple of little nodules for a tail, and then we'll kind of bring those tails out in a flowing section like that. So you can see how the water underneath, all of those lines that we've kind of put in, are creating the waves around the fish, and the fish is actually sitting in the water. So it's really important to do the kind of water first before you do your fish. Now I could have put a lot less water colours together and had a lot more of the orange colours, but this was kind of my idea in my head, and it was the first time I was doing it. So this is you seeing me do it for the first time, and I've learnt a lot from doing it as well. So cutting smaller sections for the colours on the nozzle extensions. And then what I'm doing here is I'm just using the property of the soap, which is its dragability, to give myself a little bit more kind of flow to the fish and putting out some of those colours. So we get these beautiful kind of tails happening inside the soap to give it a little bit more just of this really beautiful featheriness very much like a koi carp would be. So we've got the top. Now this is looking down on top of the fish. You can see there that it's looking a little bit more on its side, but it will look more like a top-down version in a little while. And again, I'm going through there and thinking, right, not quite happy with how the soap is sitting. I'm going to go through with my bamboo skewer. And this is the great thing with soap, is you can go in, give something a go, try it, learn from what you have done, and then make slight adjustments to the next time you do it. So this is by no means perfect, but it is a great example of how you can kind of think of a technique and say, how do I do that? This might be the way of doing it. I'm going to do it this way, and then I'll see how I might do it in another way. So again, we're going in with our second fish here. I probably next time would only do a single fish, give myself a bit more room on the canvas, and a bit more ability to create some really beautiful wavy fins and stuff like that. But again, you can see I'm really keeping it simple, and I'm building up each of these fish as shapes rather than kind of like trying to draw something as naturalistically as possible. This needs to be accessible for you to do. And you could do all sorts of things in here. If you wanted, you could do a dragon, or you could do a snake, or you could do a landscape in this way as well. You could make a tree and give it some beautiful featheriness. There's lots of things you could do by kind of painting in this way on the top of a soap. So it's a really great technique for kind of being able to get your artistic side of things out. And you don't have to be a great drawer. You don't have to be this kind of like wonderful artist. You can do this really simply by just thinking about the shapes. So it's a teardrop shape body. We're coming out with these kind of flecks and flicks of colour on the top of it. And we're just allowing the soap to kind of flow out of these things, easing off squeezing when we want a pointed area, using the length of that tube to give it some real kind of placing. You can place it by using that extension, and then using our bamboo skewer in order to create these nice long feathery tails in the fish itself. So once we've got to this point here, we want to put in some side fins, and we want to kind of get the fins that are on the side of the fish. But what we're just going to do is shape some of that tail out by using some of the blue. So you do want to leave a little bit of that blue left over, so you can put it into areas where you think you want a little bit more movement, a little bit more kind of shape for the fish. And you can push your fish shape in a little bit by using the squeeze bottles in this way. And again, you can see there I've just tidied up the shape. We're going to get a little bit of additional colour in here just to give it some movement and some flow of the water around it. So again, I'm using the qualities of the soap to be able to kind of give it some shine, to make it look like it's actually sitting under the water. There's lots of ways that you can do this. And again, this is the first time I've done it. So I want to then take the learning I've got here and maybe transfer that to another idea, style, something else I'm going to do in this way, but I can then transfer all the learning I've had from this to that new soap. So again, I've layered some soaps on top of one another. I'm going to use my bamboo skewer here just to pull that soap in the way I want it to look like the fins of this fish. So I'm using several techniques here. I'm just using the soap as it comes out to give me these kind of shapes and things, so they do look fundamentally like the fish we're trying to portray. So again, a couple of little blobs on each side there. Go in with another colour. Just add that soap in. And then go in with our bamboo skewer in a second, just to give us that real kind of feeling of it flowing through the water. So we'll just flow these down a little bit. And again, the water flowing through the fins is how it's going to look. So I'm not particularly worried about that. This is purely an experiment. This is looking at ways of making an interesting effect on the top of the soap. And so we have our fish there. Let's get a little bit more just in, so it really is attached to the body here. So we've got that, and we're kind of just flowing these bits and pieces through. And one of the things that you do need to bear in mind when you do stuff like this is sometimes less is more. Now what I've got is just some black soap in a pot here, and it's just for two little dots at the front there for the eyes. So this just makes it really look like it is the fish on the tops rather than underneath or from the side. And that's really where I'm going to leave it. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a pull on these so it pulls it into a kind of tear shape, into a teardrop shape, rather than just a blob. So it does look like it is the fish's eyes rather than just some blobs that I've put on top. And again, because we've got a nice trace with this soap, we can manipulate it in the mould and we can really get it to where we want it to be. So I've got a little bit of a light shine on top of that one, which will go once this is all saponified up. And we're just going to leave this now for a good 24 to 48 hours to kind of set up and stuff. Now, I did have quite a lot of soap left over, so I've put those into some moulds elsewhere after this, but I just wanted to get a little bit more of the soap into the mould. So I'm adding a little bit of it here and there and pulling it through. But ultimately, that is the soap as it's going to look. So let's get the lid on, get it saponified, and we'll come back when we are ready to give this a cut. So let's take a look at our final soap in here now that it's been saponified for a couple of days and take a look. So there we have our fish in a pond. I also had I want to try and get a fish coming out of the mold there, but next time I wouldn't bother with that. I just keep the two in the screen there. So I'm going to turn this out. It's going to give it a little push on the top, and then if I fold my fingers underneath and just release the pressure, the vacuum that's been basically there, and give it a very gentle push. Now I have left this for a couple of days, so it's fully saponified and it's fully set up, so that I can manipulate it and give it a plane and stuff like that as I want to. And what you'll find is as I turn this over in a second, it's quite a thin soap, but do you know what? We're learning on this one, and it doesn't matter. You can do these little soaps like this and come back in and make some real dents in how you then finesse this technique. We've all seen soaps being cut up, so what I'm going to do is just fast forward my way through this and get this cut up and show you the final soap. So as we just speed this up now, you'll see that I'm using just a ruler to get some measurements so I can cut this down into nice bars. And I'm also going to use a set square so I make sure that everything is nice and level, and we've got some really nice cuts going on there. But this is really how you can cut any soap. You don't need to have any fancy equipment, just a knife and a ruler will do. And then all I'm going to do is plane down the sides and bevel the edges so that we've got some really nice looking soaps. And what I am going to do with this soap is, rather than using it, I'm going to pop it into a frame, and I'm going to have this as kind of like a display soap, which is why they're slightly thinner than a normal depth of soap. And then we'll put this together so you can see it in all of its glory. So that is our final soap, and it's an absolutely fantastic technique. It needs a little bit of working through, but you can see there that as long as you're using the rough shapes, you get something that looks absolutely fantastic. So hopefully you've really enjoyed this video. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps me grow and allows me to make more videos and tutorials for all of you. When you subscribe, don't forget to click the bell icon if you'd like to get notified when a new video is uploaded. And thanks a lot, Soapsters. I'll see you again next time.